Every time you take a step, you assume your foot is traveling from point A to point B. You make contact with the ground and you move forward. It feels incredibly simple, but imagine you're standing in a room and you decide to walk toward a closed door on the opposite wall. To reach that door, you have to follow a basic rule of geometry. Before you can cover the total distance, you must first cross exactly half of that space. And once you reach that halfway mark, you still have to cover half of the remaining distance, then half of that new remainder, then half of the next one. You divide the gap into a quarter, an eighth, a 16th, shrinking the fractions indefinitely. If physical space works this way, if every gap contains an infinite number of smaller gaps, you would have to complete an endless number of steps just to cross a room. Reaching that door should be mathematically impossible. You run into the exact same problem if you introduce relative speed. Let's say a fast runner is sprinting to catch a much slower target that has been given a slight head start. This illustration breaks down the famous thought experiment of Achilles chasing a tortoise. By the time the runner sprints to the exact spot where the target began, the tortoise has used that time to crawl a tiny distance forward. Now the runner has to cover that new distance, but the tortoise will have moved again. The runner is trapped constantly arriving at where the target used to be. The physical gap gets infinitely small, but it never closes. This brings us to the illusion of time itself. Consider an arrow fired from a bow, suspended mid-flight. If you isolate a single perfect instant of that flight, a moment lasting exactly 0 seconds, the arrow occupies a fixed specific space. At that exact durationless instant, it is perfectly static. If time is constructed out of an endless sequence of these 0-second, frozen moments, continuous motion does not exist. It is an illusion generated by our minds. These three impossible scenarios were explicitly mapped out 2,500 years ago by the ancient Greek philosopher Zeno of Elea. He built his logic on a single premise, that space and time are perfectly continuous. If they are continuous, they can be sliced into smaller and smaller pieces forever without hitting a bottom limit. Our flawed human senses tell us that things move smoothly from one place to another, but the strict logic of mathematics demands that to cross a continuous space, you have to complete an infinite sequence of divisions. This is the definition of a paradox. You start with a flawless set of logical rules, follow them step by step, and arrive at a conclusion that is physically absurd. Since humans obviously cannot complete an infinite number of physical tasks, Zeno concluded that physical motion is a lie. He believed the entire universe is completely stationary, and our experience of reality is a localized illusion. For millennia, nobody could figure out where Zeno's logic broke down. It wasn't until the invention of calculus that mathematicians finally built a tool to process infinity. They proved a concept called a converging geometric series. If you add an endless string of shrinking fractions, a half, a quarter, an eighth, they don't grow infinitely large. They eventually sum up to exactly one solid finite number. This chart graphs the trajectory of the runner crossing paths with the slower target over time. Because the runner's sequence of shrinking steps has a finite mathematical limit, their path can easily cross over the target's trajectory. But while calculus neatly solves the problem on paper, modern quantum physics shows that reality is far messier. Researchers studying subatomic particles have discovered the quantum Zeno effect, a phenomenon where the act of rapidly observing a particle actually forces its physical evolution to freeze in place. We rely on advanced math every day to calculate movement and navigate the world. Yet, when we look closely enough at the fabric of space and time, the physical truth of how things actually cross from one point to another remains one